All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Strategic Priorities Communication and Intergovernmental Cooperation Committee meeting for Tuesday, March the 11th, 2025. I'll call the meeting to order. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Hearing none. Do I have an approval of the agenda? Councilor McKinnon? Hancock? Mayor? Are you with us, Deputy Mayor?
Yep,
Yeah,
be here, all good,
okay, approval of the agenda, thank you.
approved.
Okay, thank you. So we also include in your package are the minutes from January 30th, 2025. I need approval of those minutes. Councilor McKinnon? Deputy Mayor?
In favor.
Thank you. Now we're gonna move into any discussion items or reports. We have one report on the agenda for today, which is the bylaw project update. And I'm gonna hand that over to Melanie, who is going to lead us through the update of the bylaw update project. To you, Melanie.
Thank you, Chair, Deputy Mayor and Councillors. Thanks for making time for this adjusted meeting date and time. It's really good to be here with you to go through this bylaw process and respond to questions and make any changes that you recommend. My goal today is to update you on the bylaw project, discuss the process, go through the timelines. I'll spend a bit of time on the presentation to go through that detail, and then I hope to open it up and hear any changes that you would like made. So to begin, just starting on the guiding principles, and if we could open up the presentation if that's an option. Thank you.
And while you're doing that, I should have noted that Councillor Beck is sitting in with us today. Obviously looking for some update on some information on the bylaws.
No, just curious.
Curious? Okay, great. No, there was a specific agenda item you wanted to
No,
bring forward?
no.
So first, just the guiding principles. It's what you've articulated. It's articulated in the MGA. You own these bylaws. These are your bylaws. And to begin with, this is really to keep these guiding principles front of mind in all the work that we're doing, and it's guiding our approach. So council owns bylaws, don't overcomplicate, and that there are existing staff with bylaw experience that have been working and are working in supporting this work. And so this project's designed to coordinate existing efforts, collaborate with each team impacted, overcome challenges impeding progress, support jurisdictional scans, and assist with the process work required to ensure compliance with bylaw changes. And just that reminder that change isn't permanent. Some bylaws you may choose to advance, and you may propose an amendment the next day. That is within your scope to do. It isn't permanent, it can be changed. And just a reminder that in keeping with existing procedures outside of these priority bylaws, department heads may continue to bring other bylaw recommendations to their committee and council, and when approved, that would lead to additional work that they would do. So to move into who is responsible, and this is high level and we'll move into details in the following slides. So in looking at those 10 priority bylaws for 2025 and who is responsible, from committee sponsors to departments to staff, to each of the key staff subject matter experts involved in providing critical advice and insight. This is a whole of team, cross-team approach. A lot of that insight and advice would then go to you, and your decision-making would determine the direction. Most of the critical or time-sensitive priorities that you'll see in red that have been identified through multiple committee and council meetings do require significant work. Two of those there, though, are minor changes, and in keeping with the guiding principles, we won't overcomplicate. So moving then to the bylaw amendment process. And so as I review this, if you jot notes down, there's going to be a discussion at the end, both on the process and with the timelines. So to start with the process, overall, when we're amending the bylaw, there's basically 3 steps. The first is the work staff do in preparing the draft for you, making the required changes, what's known from what you've said through previous committee and council meetings, to getting input from all the experts, subject matter experts and departments that are impacted by that bylaw. At which point, through support from CAO and directors, we can take that draft bylaw, email it to you, watermarked as draft for your review and recommended changes, along with the deadline. Now, that deadline at that point, and reminders would be sent, when all of your input comes in, staff can then update that bylaw with your recommendations. And at which point, that draft bylaw and council's feedback would be submitted for review and discussion at the standing committee, which is the current procedural process for each of the sponsoring standing committees. With, of course, the invitation to other councillors to join bylaw discussions that are occurring at a sponsoring standing committee. When the bylaw draft is approved, a committee would move the bylaw to council for the adoption process. That this portion of the process, this section 2, if council or committee need more time with it or more changes, it may stay there longer. If it is approved with council input, it would then move over to council, at which point staff would do all of the amending bylaw documents and paperwork that's required to move it into council.
Well, just a question on,
Sure.
just back on, when you talk about the draft bylaw, the council's feedback are submitted for review and discussion at committee, is it this committee or is it the sponsoring committee to each of the bylaws where they're appropriately live?
It's the sponsoring standing committee identified in the previous slide. So this committee is Code of Conduct and Procedural. Procurement is within finance.
So we're just facilitating, this committee is facilitating this exercise for all the other, although we own one ourselves
Yes.
in that sense, right? Or a couple too. But for the most part, we're just going to facilitate this happening at these other committee levels. Is that correct?
So this committee is guiding the project, so providing input, receiving the updates. But once that process starts, the draft bylaw goes to all of council. The feedback then goes specifically directly to that sponsoring standing committee, whether it's finance or public works.
Because we're not overseeing that feedback, is what I'm saying, like this committee. You say, no, we're gonna strike that out, that's not, we're gonna put that back to the sponsoring committee to do that work. Okay.
So Chair, that's my understanding, unless you make a change to that process.
I don't think this is the appropriate committee to be making decisions on bylaws that belong into another area of operations. Is that fair to everybody? Okay.
That was the original intent, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you,
Other
Chair.
than our own too, that we had. We'll make those decisions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We'll move into the timeline.
Can I go back to just one thing, Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
You okay with that? Just when it goes back to the bylaw markup to council members for review and recommended changes, I like that. I'd like to know what, I have my lens, or I would have my lens that I would be looking through that. I'd be curious to see what others' lenses are, because sometimes that can prompt further discussions, and I think it might be helpful to know what, if I'm submitting just my recommendations, it might be nice to know what kind of, like.
But I thought we were gonna get that collective feedback as a council.
Chair,
Yep.
Councillor.
Sure.
This is a good question, because when that bylaw draft markup comes to you, it does have sections edited and feedback and comments to help guide you in what staff have seen or looked at, or what other input has been given by councillors.
Oh, okay.
But the question is, can it be uploaded where councillors are actually working on an active sheet and seeing what each other is doing?
Okay.
Certainly would be more efficient and desirable approach, however, that may not work for everybody. It certainly would be something that I would support, those working documents to have the feedback incorporated. Is there something we can do to incorporate the feedback into a spreadsheet, for instance, that might be a little bit easier than editing a Word document with comments and marking it up, so that we could have that collective feedback in a particular area? And then you just identify yourself as the submitter of it, and then I could see that Councillor Beck suggested this change. Councilor Tart suggested this change, got an opinion, all those might be an easy way to do it.
Yeah,
discuss
otherwise the
spreadsheet.
markup could get pretty intense.
Pretty
Well,
much.
it could, it also could get unintentionally messed up too, I guess, so I think we could lock that down for the comments and feedback to the staff. But we should have a mechanism to filter all of our feedback up into one central repository for each of the committee, or each of the, like if there was a folder on the shared drive for each one of these bylaws. And inside there would be the bylaws being marked up and a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet could be all feedback that's provided. And then you could see what everybody's saying to that, instead of
That's a
a
really
bunch
good
of
idea.
emails,
Yeah.
a bunch of emails that are going back and forth.
Yeah.
And then you gotta,
You've got it on
you
one
send it
spreadsheet.
to everybody, but you didn't send it to me, so now how do I get it? And
Just a question, can you get comment, say I'm more familiar with Google Docs, but you can get the comment box where you can bring up the box and your comment can be right there beside the particular section. Is that a doable option?
it isn't Word, I think it's just,
Pardon my
This
lack
might-
of technological skills here.
no, but it might be others, it might be others who have that saying, like, I think Word that has that option to mark it up and put comments. I'm just not sure it would work for everybody.
But there could end up being 15 comments on one section, which becomes very convoluted to try to read through if you're going into that document. So I guess to the chair's point, it might have more value to have a separate spreadsheet on a specific bylaw that says, Councillor Matart said XYZ in these sections, and then you can see that in a more fulsome way on a separate sheet from the actual bylaw.
Like if we actually set the
document.
spreadsheet up that would say, okay, identify the section you're referring to, whatever,
Yeah,
your comment, who posted it, and the
Yeah.
date. And then something like
Yeah.
that would allow us to
then you
say,
can
look,
see
if we
the
could
comment.
filter by all the common things that are coming in a section 17.0 and say, okay, well, that's obviously somewhere we wanna focus on, everybody's commenting on section
Yeah, I
17.
never thought about that.
Exactly.
And it's only the reason
Yeah,
I'm saying that.
that's the data management part of it. Yeah, okay.
And also just usability, it's pretty easy to do. The markup thing is great, but I think you would have to have an understanding of how to do that. Not saying not every, you can't, but
And it could be pretty marked up.
it would be pretty marked up.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's pretty straight. Let's not complicate it. Let's simple spreadsheet thing if we can set up in there, it would be great for each of the areas. So maybe we can set up a SharePoint site that allows us to go in and to do that. And then indicate no emails, like try to get them into the spreadsheet if you can.
Spreadsheet. Yeah, that's a great
Thank
idea.
Councillor Yankoff, I know you're listening there. Do you support any of what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's fine. I don't know if you're gonna get, a lot of counselors wanting to do it that way. They're probably gonna wanna do more of a physical, debate, but I certainly like the option. Thank you.
Well, we can capture it
Nobody
too,
wanted
right?
to
We can
sit
capture it in
today.
there. Someone can scribe
Nobody
anything that
wanted to
goes
sit
in there.
with me today. So thank you.
We'll play around with the technology piece and see if we can find something that's
Yeah, more efficient, yeah.
relatively simple and
Okay, appreciate that. So Melody, do you wanna continue on then into your timeline? Is that where we were?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a note I just wanted to add to this discussion, and that is if when we have identified this process, if you find it isn't working or there's a way for it to work better, we are flexible. So if the review process works well, great. If it needs a bit more tweaking to work better for you, and I guess that would be one of the roles of this committee, to be able to provide that feedback and perhaps review the process, okay? The only piece I'll mention at the end with staff incorporating changes into an amending bylaw with reading papers is at the very end of the process when there is a lot of drafts and all of those drafts are being merged into one document. There is a need at the end to go through quite an extensive editing process. And so staff have been doing that, but if counselors have experience in bylaw and backgrounds and want to just do a grammatical review, that option is there as well to ensure the bylaw is in the best presentation possible when it goes to council. Looking at the timelines, we'll spend a bit more time here. I've tried to separate, you'll see the black line, I've tried to separate the pieces that will require more time with the pieces that are that can be done quicker. Each of the bylaws, while some of the drafts can be done quicker, there are processes on the other side and decisions that may take longer. So For example, in the first dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly properties, that's moving into second reading today. Along the way, staff across teams are just working on process work with the removal of delays in the process. We're just ready to be all hands on deck to make sure that we can respond as quickly as the bylaw now requires us to. The second, procedural, is advancing very well. An update went through the Finance Committee. This is one of those bylaws that require a number of discussions, and there are a number of questions on it. So when budgets have concluded, this would go into committee for a process for discussions. And at which point, when it's determined the direction, it would follow the regular process of review along to advancement. The code of conduct is one of those I mentioned earlier. We won't overcomplicate it.
Sorry to interrupt you, just have a quick question.
Sure.
And it kind of goes back to, you talked about how the procedural bylaws, complicated and it's requiring a lot of work, and I can appreciate that. It goes back a little bit to the time, like the workflow that was prior to this. So at some point, we're gonna email council the draft and request changes, and we talked about documenting those changes. But I think it goes back to a comment that Councillor Beck made, about, is there an opportunity to review these collaboratively in the sense of like understanding really what is in there? Like you're gonna review it yourself and interpret it the way you interpret it. I'm gonna do the same. Because your concern was at one of the last meetings is that we get the bylaw came there for changes and you didn't have enough time to review or understand. And so I'm just wondering, like, is there somewhere we're missing that where collectively we're all on the same page as to what's happening with the change?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for mentioning that one. I was speaking about procurement, but looking at procedural and
Or any one of them?
swapping them around. Yeah, so
What's wrong?
it's procurement's one that's ready with questions to be answered before it can advance. But to your point, some of the bylaws do require an all of council discussion. There is no committee of the whole, so other than having all of council members give input in advance and then come to a standing committee for the discussion, like what Deputy Mayor said, some do want to have that discussion. So the current process is that discussion would happen at the standing committee.
If that's all, sorry, that's only for the members who are on that standing committee, right? So then what about how do we get the rest of us there? Is there an opportunity to have, it's like the budget where we all come together and we discuss the budget in public. Can we come together and discuss the bylaw if that's what your intended purpose was or recommendation?
Yeah, well,
I'm using you as an example because you
No, that's
brought
fine.
that up.
Yeah, that's fine. I think if we had the markup to council members for review and recommended changes, I thought that was a step that we missed with unsightly premises, that I didn't have that opportunity to sort of see it didn't go through the make the required changes, email to impacted departments. I thought that's the missing step. I think this process captures a lot of what I was hoping to achieve with that. To have a look and see what the recommended changes are. Other people might have recommended changes as well too, and then we go through on the other part. I just thought it came from the.
But I still think it keeps the others out of the standing committee to participate in that feedback. In the sense, unless you come, like.
Well, they are all invited to join bylaw discussions with the sponsoring standing committee.
Well, if that's it, that's fine, I'm just, if that's the opportunity to have that, or would it be better served to have them get a scheduled appointment that's where that is on the agenda, much like our budget stuff we do. Is it that important that everybody comes and goes through the bylaw changes that we're all working towards, as opposed to
Some people, some councils may not have the same sentiments that you have, it's a bylaw. I have an interest, especially in procurement bylaw, but other bylaws, I might not show up to the standing committee to find out what's going on. I'll just wait until it comes to council. I think it comes down to a choice.
Okay, if it's a choice, that's fine. I'm just throwing out stuff here. I'm not,
No, it's
I'm not
great.
suggesting a change. If it's choice, he's here by choice today. Obviously, others can be there by choice, but I guess when we get to council and we are debating the approval of a bylaw, I'd hate to see us get into debate as to we didn't have time to go through these and do all this stuff when that's,
Yep.
and then we're asking for a deferral and things because we didn't spend the time to understand what those were. So we could alleviate that by, and maybe maybe the reason for that is people can't say, well, I can't go to every standing committee meeting to sit there through that. So is it better to be brought forward? Just some suggestions through the project. That's right.
Just to that point, I think this is where you have the opportunity to look at what, it's gonna come to the floor to be debated or for adoption under that last blue bullet on page, whatever page number that is. When the bylaw draft is approved, committee moves bylaw to council for adoption process. So it's gonna be worked up. It's gonna be sent out to council to look at it, gather your thoughts. You're gonna have the opportunity to provide your feedback. So you have that time in advance of it coming to council for formal adoption. You have that time to think about it and to provide your input. So I think when you get to that point, by the time it comes to council, you should have had several opportunities, because it's going to go out to council. Council's gonna have their opportunity to provide feedback. It's going back to committee for a draft, and then it's gonna come to council for adoption. So I think there's enough steps there that you can get, if you so choose, to look at the bylaw, offer your input, and possibly attend a meeting, or just simply say, I'm fine with everything, and don't put anything in. I think what we're doing is we have to offer the opportunity for people to provide their input.
And I think we're doing that. I'm just thinking about another collective step, and if that's not necessary, then that's fine. Maybe we'll, as we move through these, we may determine that there is a gap there, and that's a gap that we want to fill. But as of now, I support that. We're definitely given lots of opportunities for feedback and review. I think it addresses the concern that you raised at the last council meeting. I'm not debating that. If we get to a point where we feel that we should have come together as a group to go through them because of their, the nature of them, for instance, then we may address those at those times. So let's just, it was just a suggestion and not looking for change, so.
Yeah.
Sorry, Melanie, I just wanted to bring that up, but I'll let you continue through there. I know you have a lot to get through there.
Chair and councillors, that was a good discussion, good direction. Both of those listed procedural and code of conduct, when we went back to that guiding principle of not overcomplicating, these are the two where we know there's some very minor, simple changes. Code of conduct is a change to align with MGA and slight wording, and procedural, it's really, what do you want to tighten up in the procedural in advance of a new CAO coming in? No drastic changes, to start us off with, to ease in the CAO, at which point maybe we do come together and look at more extensive procedural changes. I don't know if this is the time to be making significant changes. So those two are identified as minor fixes, and to allow us time to work on some of the more complex bylaws. One of which is below there, the emergency measures bylaw. The emergency measures bylaw is our most outdated bylaw, and in addition to reviewing a draft, there is a number of requirements both through the MGA and the Emergency Measures Act. So the bylaw accompanies training, it updates, it accompanies the emergency review of the emergency plan and context. It's there's a whole of team approach for that one. We realize that fire is simulating a state of emergency exercise June 17th. We're hopeful that we could bring this emergency measures bylaw to your review fairly quickly. And throughout April, complete that work. In May, do training requirements, and June, be ready for simulation exercises. If we don't, we'll lose that opportunity through fire, and we'll get into our busy summer and fall season when you may experience emergencies. The patio bylaws, a lot of work has been done on drafting it, and that's one thing, and it is a really well-written document. And having a draft is only one part of the process. And to Deputy Mayor's question on that one, I think it's important. I just want to read one short quote here. The City of Charlottetown is enriched through the efforts of business owners constructing and designing beautiful outdoor destinations where residents and visitors alike can gather, enjoy a meal, and take in the sights and sounds of the city. And in many of their advocacy points, the Chamber has also advocated to create a place downtown where people want to stay, to linger, to shop, to enjoy, and these patios do that. But the city is also tasked with balancing the importance of patios with the importance of parking alongside the importance of reducing the loss of fees with parking lots and the city right-of-ways when those are replaced with patios. So there's a lot of big discussion topics and research needed to really understand the fees in order to present a plan to you that you can make an informed and best decision. We do have time. All of these patios are locked into encroachment agreements until the end of 2026. So while it would be good to finish the draft bylaw, Planning and Heritage will be bringing additional recommendations forward that will allow you to determine what direction you take with patios.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Ken?
With that, so the bylaw, the patios that are in place right now, they're in an agreement, so we can't say, okay, they need to change it, like that agreement is set in stone.
Chair to councillor, yes.
It is, that's what it is? So the 19 patios that are in place, they can't be changed?
The street patios, the parking lot patios, or parking meter patios, Chair to your worship, sorry. They are in encroachment agreements between the province and municipality that is signed until the very end of 2026. It's a contract that they have that spot until that point.
That was 19.
I'm not sure on the number.
Why do we approve those every year then?
There are currently 44 parking spots
There's more than that.
taken up with patios. Our bylaw says that we can go up to 46 patios. So the question would be, what happens if a new patio comes into place this year? Does their encroachment order then go into 2027?
So just to clarify, Mr. Chair, did you say 45 patios or 45 parking spaces?
There's 46 parking spots in our current bylaw that allows for parking spots. So it's 46 parking spots, not 46 patios.
And they are there until 2026.
They're, yes, Chair to your worship, until the end of 2026. And to the Deputy Mayor's question, those new patios are also signed into 2026 agreements. All are ending at the end of 2026.
Well, okay, we have a parking study going on, correct? Working with DCI, Greater Charlottetown Chamber, Greater Charlottetown Area Chamber of Commerce. I was at one of the meetings that took place down at the Carriage House a couple of weeks ago. And downtown business people are saying, I thought this was just to be this was only a temporary corrective action for COVID. So we signed agreements for, what, 5 years?
I'm through Chair to your worship. I don't have that number.
Well, we better get that out because these downtown businesses are saying that those 45 or 40 plus parking spaces are hindering their business opportunities. And we have, well, Victoria Row, Kent Street,
So just to,
which includes also Daniel J. McDonald building.
so I can appreciate the discussion here. However, I think this kind of goes back to what is this committee's role? That those discussions should be brought to Heritage and Planning's standing committee or police to have those. I appreciate that we all have feedback on that, but we're just facilitating this bylaw to get to that point. So let's stick to that course and get the bylaw there,
Yeah.
and then we can have that at that. So,
No, but I think the chair, I think the deputy, myself are just getting on the record.
Sure.
And I know we signed agreements, but I didn't know they were until 2026. We better get that word out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you.
Thank you, Chair and your worship. And I confirm that with Todd Sutcliffe in case you have any additional questions. With
Procurement?
procurement, I touched on earlier when I was speaking about procedural, and procurement is advancing well. The update was in the finance package. There are a number of questions and discussion items that will identify final steps in that direction. So the following budgets, a discussion will go into committee, at which point it will follow the regular process that Councillor Beck and others walked us through. Following that, just looking at the fees bylaws, so there is a schedule.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question with that one?
How much on procurement? Or
Procurement, yeah. So you mentioned the Standing Committee for Finance and Administration. So at our meeting on the 4th, we talked about where it was at, and it said it was 85% complete. Like, here's the Procurement of Goods Act for the province. There's the Atlantic Procurement Agreement. We're really complicating something that I thought was started, this was started back in 2020. and we're looking at finishing it by maybe June 25th?
Through chair to your worship. If that discussion goes into committee and all is well, that could advance quicker. It is reliant on some decisions and discussions that happen at committee immediately following budget.
So it says there are 12 areas identified that administration, again, this is what you're not getting, Mr. Chair, will seek direction from council shortly after budgets are finalized. While our budget will be finalized by March 31st, local preference clause, update process by dollar value and type of purchase. Like, guys, we're really drilling way down in this. Like, Steve Wedlock produced a document back in 2020. It was going forward, and then he left. So can we try to get this into April or May? Mr. Chair? Tudor?
Well, like I said, I mean, I appreciate the comments and appreciate the suggestions. I mean, seems like they're working through it the best they can.
Yeah.
I can't comment on whether or not we're drilling down too far into these. Again, it goes back to the committee level to determine that where that appropriately belongs. I'll make my judgment on that when it comes time to review it as councillor. But, you know, I get that we need to move this forward, and I think a lot of work is being done to do that, so. If the finish line here is June, that's better than it was 6 months ago. We had no plan in place,
So it's
so.
been going on since 2019.
So let's give the
So,
opportunity here to move through that project plan on it.
I'm just asking, Mr. Chair, because it's reported to this committee or standing committee, is that, you know, June 25th might be moved down further to July. I wanna make sure that, let's put a priority on this, because this has been discussed and discussed over and over, and, you know, we're seeing now, CAO seeing it in the budget process, is that our projects are getting caught up with depreciation, interest payments, so this all has to be part of where we wanna go with the procurement policy and how it might align with our own budgetary operations when we talk about operational budget, so please.
Mr. Mayor, as part of this project, Melanie, executing on that, she would rely heavily on, I assume, the operational resources in this area. So Dan, this would fall under your area of responsibility and the CAO. So I suspect if they want to make this a top priority to allocate resources and reprioritize, that's where that's got to start, right? Melanie, appreciate you're just moving things forward the best you can. I mean, you can't control the resources and the time that it's taking, I suspect.
So, Mr. Chair, the standing committee responsible for the procurement bylaws, standing committee for finance and administration, we have made it a priority,
Yep.
An ultra priority.
But I think from the CAO's perspective, she's gotta make it a priority across the organization. Cause there's 10 bylaws here that are all being worked on concurrently, and we're probably competing with various resources
I know
in
we are.
certain areas.
Chair, may I?
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate how critical it is. That's the message coming from all fronts.
Get it done.
What's the date?
Following that is the,
March 11th.
We're gonna get it done.
Sounds clear.
Parks usage bylaw. Or zoning, sorry.
Fees.
so, thank you, Chair. So the fees bylaw, that was updated October 2024. At the end of budgets, there will be new fees that could be moved forward. Those will have to be incorporated into the fees bylaw and updated through fees that you had approved following the budget process. Under that are the three. These three, one is zoning, that is independently led through planning and heritage. They have a consultant involved. There is it's governed through the Planning Act. There is complexity and details, all of which they've been updating us regularly on. This is advancing through to the end of the year. And again, through committee, additional updates have been shared. And there is really no piece I can update on that. They are keeping us informed, and it is just on this list because we know it's a priority for 2025. Following that is the parks usage bylaw. That is a brand new bylaw requiring research. This one is an important bylaw. The other bylaws had existing work done that we could work with. This is new, so it will be moving into research once we can get some traction on some of these other bylaws. And following that is the capital recovery concept, that's with Public Works. There is some research work and work with, needed to bring in the discussion to council. This is just a concept, and depending on the direction council takes, will determine whether that becomes a bylaw and in what way.
Can I ask a question about that, Holly, please? So on your last statement there, that'll be a direction of council. When is that going to be debated? And the reason I bring this up is I think this one has raised some concern. It was brought forward at a time when we had a different CAO and a different manager, and a manager at the time who are both no longer here. So I'm not sure where this came out of, and is this still the priority of the city in our interim CAO and in our director for that area. So, I know it's there as a placeholder. I know we're not doing anything on it, but it keeps being brought up as council will determine whether or not we're gonna continue this. When can we get to that point of determining if we're moving forward with this or not?
Thank you, Chair, for clarifying that. Yes, so to all of your points, yes, like this is only a discussion item. I've spoke with those that are involved. There is potential merit, but this, unlike the other processes where you review a bylaw and, we've got a typical process, this one really does need discussions at committee and council to determine if there is interest in this topic.
So we'll move that one to Public Works. Is that where it's gonna
It is,
originate?
yes.
So,
Yeah.
Again, not sure if it's the appropriate time right now to be discussing that in Public Works. We do have an interim manager as well, not to say that he's not capable of having those discussions, but I don't know if that's where, because I think you're in the process right now of looking for management, correct?
Thank you.
I don't know, see if you support the, just in this discussion, because I know it keeps being brought up. So anyways, we'll look at maybe where that one fits in this priority project stream.
Yeah, and just to that point, Mr. Chair, and the schedule, it's showing it not
Yeah, it's not even.
moving anywhere until May.
So,
So we'd have the new manager in place by then.
okay. And again, might not even be a priority. I don't know where it came from, if it was somebody else's priority and maybe not.
If I may, Chair, I think the concern is one of finances in terms of the cost, the rapidly escalating costs of putting road infrastructure in and water and sewer as we're trying to manage the growth with the housing development, and a sense of perhaps a burden on the rest of the established community for the growth maybe not being appropriate. So this mechanism, I think, was put forward by the former manager as a means to allow growth, but to have the costs borne by those who are benefiting most directly, so.
Okay, well, we're not spending any time on it right now, so we'll,
So are we talking about development agreements? Is that what we're talking about, development charges?
at least we don't know what we're talking about.
No, that's
the
what
problem.
it is.
Well, no, I know, but we haven't got into that. I mean, it was brought to
Well, just
council.
clarifying, is that what we're talking about?
Well, I think that's really the basic thrust behind that
Concept
concept.
back to the patio, please. So I know this falls under the standing committee for protection and services. And these
And
encroachments
And plan.
and planning, these encroachment requests go through two committees. And Deputy, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the chair of planning, development and heritage. Are these agreements for every 2 years, or do we sign them for 5 years?
I thought they were every 2 years, but I would love that clarification, because if they are, then they expired last year and new agreements must have been signed this year, because I don't believe that Todd Sutcliffe was even informed that we were going through this bylaw exercise, because the phone call I received for him 2 weeks ago saying he was putting another patio in place, and I said, well, you better check with senior leadership, because this bylaw is being completely under review. He said he had no idea.
Through chair to the deputy to mayor, if I may.
Yep.
Todd was involved in early conversations. And the information on the encroachment process, Todd does manage that encroachment process with the province, then it comes to the mayor for signature, or the mayor's office for signature. Todd will have to speak to us on these questions.
Councillor Beck?
Yeah, just to tag on to that, I think if I remember, we had a discussion at Planning and Heritage around the fact that there was a request to have some from longer term planning, because I think we were renewing them on an annual basis. And I think the downtown businesses were looking for a little bit longer term predictability. So I think that may have been how we got into 2026. If I'm trying to think back
No,
to
the
discussions.
encroachment orders were always every 2 years. They were never every year. Encroachment orders were never yearly.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I'm just gonna jump in, just looking at time, and again, I'm not, it's a great discussion, go ahead, but we're at the wrong table having these discussions. This should be brought forward with that bylaw. I want the opportunity, Melody, just to give us the lay of the project and how the project's going. So I appreciate the questions, I'm not trying to get rid, but I think that they need to be at that level.
We'll bring it back to planning and protection services, yeah.
Thank you. If you wanna proceed.
Thank you, Chair. So as budgets conclude, there's a number of bylaws ready for your review. At the start of April, we'll stagger the release, but we'll be looking for feedback on the emergency measures bylaw, the code of conduct bylaw, and procedural. Again, code of conduct and procedural are not to complicate, only what's required. Emergency measures is a bit more complex. Along with this, you may see a patio bylaw review. Again, even if it is reviewed, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made in order for it to ever advance. As well, the procurement, depending on the discussion following budgets, you may see the procurement then advance. With that, there'll be a number of bylaws coming to you. As you approach spring and summer, it gets busier. We'll try to do what we can through that April to June to advance as many as possible. And then as they advance into draft, they may stick with council and committee for further discussion if required. I'll move quickly to the work completed. So to test out.
Mr. Chair, could I just intervene? Bylaws in the queue, emergency measures, code of conduct. Guys, we've reviewed this code of conduct since I arrived here in 2019, same as the procedural bylaw. Patio bylaw, I want in there April, whatever, procedural bylaw.
Procurement.
Thank you, procurement bylaw. Procedures in my head. I'm trying to get it right.
Well, I guess I would support that as well from a project perspective. Sorry, it was a good catch, I didn't see that as well, but that's not in there in April. So when, if it's not in that timeframe, like that's in high priority, where?
Through
Next page.
Chair to the committee, the procurement, so when we're looking at April and the bylaws coming to you, we know right now emergency measures, code of conduct, procedural coming to you. And those are minor changes, code of conduct and procedural. We know patio is important, we know procurement's important. We hope those bylaws will be coming to you quickly for review. It will determine, there'll be a discussion on procurement, and then hopefully that will immediately go to you for review. It depends on the decisions made at that discussion. As well, patio bylaw, while you may review it, there's still some very complex conversations to be had. So I hope we can advance the bylaw while we look to the experts to give us advice on how to navigate these complex competing factors.
All right, that's fair.
Just to be clear, it is absent from the graphic there, but it is very much in the workflow.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I just,
I think,
again, we need to remind ourselves, repetition is the key to learning, as Councilor Beck knows. So it should be there.
So
Procurement bylaw.
is that like the Bruins losing game after game after game, is that correct?
Hold on now, don't get.
We're not going there, no hockey here, it's all business.
All business, let's get back to business then.
Chair, for the sake of time,
Need a bylaw draft.
so we're looking at the completed bylaws. These helped us sort out the process. So to your point, Councillor Beck, the process that councillors have advised and the changes to make this work better for you were made. There were 5 minor change bylaws and the dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly priority bylaws, so 6 in total that were completed through January and February. That helped refine the process, and moving forward, we know what our process is for the high priority bylaws. And
That's good
that's-
progress. Those some good things that are happening here, thank you very much. Lots of things that are moving forward on that. Awesome,
Great things happening, Charles.
there you go.
Great things happen here.
Great things happen here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that wraps it up. I'll just leave on the quote with the deputy mayor. She said, when we get these done, we're gonna step back and say, look at all we got done. And we had that moment in protective and emergency services when we passed a few bylaws, and that's exactly what Councillor McCabe said. So we're moving forward. We are gonna get it done, and it's gonna be progress at the end of the year. So I'll just leave, there are a few discussion topics. I think we talked through most of them, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So the one thing that I took from all of this, I took a lot from it, but one thing sticking out is, I think that there's a great opportunity here for council. I know it's in the workflow to really communicate this out to the rest of council, that, there's opportunities to come to standing committees during the time of the review of the bylaw to provide further input beyond the initial stage that you're getting, which is this mechanism that we're trying to put in place that allow to capture that feedback. But if they want to come and speak to it directly, coming to a council meeting or a committee meeting of that appropriate, that's the appropriate time. Is that correct? Does everybody agree that would be the most appropriate time to do that? Now, should they be advised of that in advance?
I was just going to suggest, Mr. Chair, that to follow that process through, given the number of emails that everyone gets on the daily, oftentimes they might not even be aware of someone else's agenda if they're not on that committee.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's some way, Melanie, that we could incorporate into the comms that when a bylaw is appearing on, say, finance and admin's agenda,
Coming up.
that you would just send a note out to mayor and council and saying, this bylaw is going to be discussed on this date at this meeting, if you choose to sit in. Is that something that would,
I think that could work. Does Councillor Beck want to make a comment?
Could that be part of, they're doing the update, like departmental update? Could that be part of the update that goes out? That goes out, I think, on a weekly basis.
well, that's a good
Jane said.
idea.
It's in
We
that.
So then
already
you
have
just
that internal
incorporate-
comms piece.
You can
Yeah,
incorporate
that's
that
a
as an
good idea.
element in that.
Yeah, we would just use that tool that's already in
Yeah.
place for you guys.
And I
Absolutely.
think I was gonna bring up as new business, I forgot to bring it up because it was in the report, but the other communication, in that same
Yes.
communication around the intergovernmental affairs that we're having, and
Right.
you and I talked about where that
Yep.
might go.
Yep.
So I think that would be all, like,
Yep.
I look at that as, that's a great communication tool that's applicable, like internal to us, which I think is great.
Okay.
So that's a really, I've thought that tool has been wonderful to get real good updates on what's going on, so I think just add that to it.
Perfect.
I just want to go back to your point, Councillor Matarda, that when we had this discussion, when we were prioritizing this whole update for the bylaws, a lot of it came from the fact that there were some situations that arose where people didn't like the bylaws the way they're written and said we had to go through the updating, we had to get them updated. So that was the one part, but the other part was we wanted to emphasize the importance of hearing from everyone so that everyone is fully aware and engaged as to what is potential implications are of any changes that we do make. So as we were going through that process, that's why we wanted to ensure that we kept everyone as informed as possible as to what's coming forth. Here are the recommended changes, what else do you see? And then let's do that so that when it comes time to vote, we actually know what we're voting on. So that was kind of the
Yeah.
background.
And I think this is,
This
we're on
is
a good
good.
path for that, so just to wrap up, I wanna say thank you, Melanie, for the presentation, thank you for guiding us through the work that's being done, and it certainly is a lot of work that's happening, and I think we need to recognize that. There's always gonna be challenges in getting everybody's attention to work through these bylaws. There's a lot of stuff that's going on here at the corporation, so we need to be patient as much as we can and work through those. So thank you very much for all your work, I appreciate it. And to all the staff who are working on that as well. All right, we're gonna move on to new business. I think Councillor McKinnon wanted to bring something forward, and it sounds like the mayor would like to bring
Yes,
something
please,
forward as well.
after
Yes.
Councillor
Thank
McKinnon.
you.
I defer to Councillor McKinnon.
Just a point and I guess a question. I know historically in the past where councillors have been asked to assist people, residents in getting jobs. And I don't believe that, unless I misunderstand, that councillors are allowed to help residents get jobs. But over the last couple of weeks, I've gotten phone calls from residents saying that they've been told to contact their councillor. And
From me.
word from your,
Yeah,
wasn't saying, but from you.
Yeah.
And I feel that me, and I've heard that other councillors are getting the same phone calls. And I think it's inappropriate for you to be telling them to call the councillors when the councillors can't help them. It's making us look like the bad guy. So I would like to see this stop.
How does that fall under strategic priorities? Like, can I just tell you something, Mr. Chair? I tell those constituents that I ask to call other councillors, including yourself, if you need help, if you don't get the help you need, call me back. Plus, I also suggest that there are private enterprises out there that are looking for staff. So that's what I do.
The message to me, your
Yeah,
worship,
but
no
that-
disrespect.
Yeah, I'm gonna,
Yeah, that
Chair,
again,
I point
I'm gonna interject. Can I
what does that
interject?
have to do with the strategic priorities?
Councillor Mayor, or Councillor Mayor? I can't understand me, Councillor. I'm going to interject. We're here today to go through this. I appreciate you bringing new business. I'm not sure, it's likely something that should be brought forward to the HR committee, and the chair is here for the HR committee as well, so maybe something that can be brought forward there from an HR perspective. But again, it's not likely here at the strategic
Well,
priorities one.
Okay,
So
I
just note-
apologize if
no,
I brought
no.
it on the wrong committee.
That's fine.
I'll bring it up again, that's
If you
fine.
could, yeah, it just, I think it's the,
Bring it up tonight at council too.
Sure.
Yeah, because you already sent out an email.
okay, thank you very much. Is there any other, do you have any new
I
business?
do. On more pressing matters,
Your worship, I don't think you need to be disrespectful.
I'm not
Carry
being,
on.
no,
Folks, we're not turning
On
my,
more
we're not
pressing
turning my
matters.
committee into a
we had
circus
this
here.
discussion in finance yesterday.
We're not gonna turn this
No,
into,
no,
I
we
like,
had
do
this
you have,
discussion
do you
yesterday in
have something like to
finance.
bring in business?
We've been trying to meet with the province on revenue share. This is the Strategic Priorities Communications and Intergovernmental Cooperation Committee. I think, Mr. Chair, I've tried, I've reached out. Mayor Dan Kuchar has reached out. FPEIM has reached out. I think we have to look at this committee as steering us towards trying to get that meeting. So how we do that, I think we could have, and again, I'm just putting this on notice, to give us notice to think about it, how we can prepare that, because I think we need a more collective effort.
So there was a letter that was sent, correct?
Twice,
Have we had a response from that letter?
no.
Okay, so
And
let's
the
put.
FPEIM sent out 3.
Okay, so let's put this on to new business. We know that there is obviously a change in administrative government with the government of Prince Edward Island, so it might be an opportunity to revisit that under new leadership, and we can go from there.
Thank you.
I
Thank
think
you,
it's a
sir.
great thing. Okay. All right, do I have adjournment? Do I have, what's it called? I'm losing my train of thought.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
But you had a point that you wanted to bring up on a new business.
No, it was just, I did answer my question. It was in regard